Hi everyone, on behalf of First Robotics Team 1325 Inverse Paradox, I'd like to welcome you to today's panel. So today's panel is actually on women in STEM or STEAM fields and what their experiences are like. And we have our four wonderful panelists today to tell us all about that. So first of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm your moderator for today. My name is Nicole. I'm a grade 10 student at John Fraser and also a member of this year's business team. So let's also go through a brief introduction of First Robotics Team 1325. So we're a community team who are based in Mississauga, Ontario, and also a registered charity with the CRA. We've also been a team for over 15 years. Now, just a note, we will go over this later, but our 2020-2021 membership is open, so stay tuned for more details about that. So before we meet our panelists, I'd actually like to give you guys a couple of reminders. So first of all, to all of our audience, please be respectful at all times. And in addition, please keep your cameras and your microphones off at all times, just because we are recording this session, and like all the other sessions we have had until now, they will be made available on our website. In addition, one more thing, just a reminder not to use the chat at any point during this panel, just because we aren't looking at the chat. If you do wish to ask our panelists any questions, you can use the link available both in the chat and on my shared screen over here. So without any further ado, let's hear from our panelists. So I have four panelists today, and I'm just going to ask them to quickly introduce themselves to you. So Hannah, would you like to start?
Yep, for sure. Hello everyone, my name is Hannah. I'm currently a first-year software engineering student at the University of Waterloo. I was on the team for 4 years, and I was a programmer, eventually rising to lead programmer in grade 11. And currently I'm working part-time teaching kids how to code, teaching middle school kids how to code virtually.
That sounds so fun. So Shreya, what about you?
Hey guys, so I'm Shreya. I was on FRC 1325 a long time ago. I was on it for 4 years, and I joined doing a bit of everything, and then later on I was helping to lead the business team along with Emily. And right now I am working as a data scientist at RBC, and I just graduated last year from the University of Waterloo.
Wow, congratulations on your graduation.
Thanks.
So Liz, do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Elizabeth, or Liz if you want to save yourself the time. I'm in the engineering science program at the University of Toronto. I just finished my first semester, and this Monday I start my second semester. On the team, I was the electrical lead, starting in grade 10 around there, and I became co-captain in my final year. So I was on the team for 4 years.
Wow, that's really cool. So finally, we'd like to hear from Emily, our final panelist. Emily?
Hi, so my name's Emily. I was on the team. I started in grade 10, and then I stayed until my graduation when I became co-business head with Shreya. I graduated from the commerce program at McMaster in 2019, and currently I'm finishing up my MBA at McMaster as well.
We really have a lot of successful women in this panel today, so make sure you listen for what they have to say and what advice they have to give you. So just one final thing before we actually start with the questions today. So if you do have at any point during today's session any questions for our panelists, please use the link which will be made available in the chat as well as over here on the PowerPoint presentation to ask any questions that you do have. We also ask that if you have a question directed towards a specific panelist, to include their name in the question, just so we know who it's for. So after our general questions, we will be addressing all of these questions. So let's take it away. So let's start off with each of your experiences on the team. So when you joined initially, what was your experience like? What was the team environment like, and did you feel welcomed? So Emily, let's start with you.
Yeah, for sure. So when I started on the team, we hadn't really had a lot of significant successes yet. We were still like trying to get our bearings. So it was a lot more casual of an environment. We were still really passionate, really dedicated, but it was just like less pressure. So we were really able to build the team kind of how we wanted and structure it kind of how we wanted. So that was kind of what it was like for me. And it was just easier because it was small and we were able to make like really close relationships, and then being able to see it grow into what it is today, like just from our humble beginnings, has been just really amazing.
Yeah, I think that's a super cool experience to have, to get to shape how you want the team to be. And I know Shreya joined the team at around the same time as you. So Shreya, how did your experience with the team environment, how did you find it was similar or different to Emily?
Yeah, it was really similar. It was really great because it was like a small, kind of really tightly knit team, and so we were able to make close friendships really fast, and we were able to work together really well. But what was also really interesting was as we grew larger, kind of learning how to grow that, like being able to build close friendships even on a bigger team was a really interesting process. And I think one of the really helpful parts was having mentors along the way to kind of help us out and make sure things were going well.
Yeah, I even think now that one of the best assets you have on any robotics team is that element of mentorship in between each of the students, but also between the actual mentors. Now, just moving on to Liz, I know you obviously joined the team much later than Emily and Shreya, when it was a lot more similar to what it is today. So how did you feel that that impacted your experience?
Yeah, so Emily and Shreya both joined when the team was growing. I joined like right after its peak when the school it was formerly hosted in, Gordon Graydon, was announced to be closing. So after my year, the membership slowly went down as the school's population decreased. I still found the team really great. I was a really shy middle schooler. I barely ever spoke. I'd never be caught dead doing a panel like this. So coming in, I was a bit overwhelmed by the sheer number of people and the noises and the fast-moving robot and the wires. But it was really easy and really quick for me to like find my place. Like I found the electrical sub team, which was like a tight bunch, and I got along really well with them. And as we talk about like electrical sub team and business sub team, it's also important to remember like the team as a whole, no matter how big it got, there was always that mentality of like we're all in this together, we're all one big family, and it was just there from the very beginning. So I found that really great.
Yeah, I joined the team last year, and I even found, because of all of the pressure that you have to build a robot and get so many things accomplished during such a small amount of time, that really brings people together.
Oh yeah.
So moving on, so on the team, what type of roles did each of you take on, and what different things did you learn? So this time, let's start with Shreya.
Yeah, so when I started on in grade 9, I was kind of like a general member of the team. We didn't really have defined sub teams back then. So I was doing a bit of everything basically, except for coding, which is kind of ironic because like right now all I do is coding for my job. But I did a bit of mechanical, a bit of electrical, and like a bit of design as well. And some of the basic things I learned were like how to use Autodesk, and then later on a bit of SolidWorks to design parts, how to like plan a design from the beginning to the end when you actually get introduced to the game on kickoff day, and then actually kind of prototyping. So we did a lot of prototyping, trying out different components, different subcomponents for each of the tasks that we wanted to do. And so this is back when in Graydon we didn't really have any sort of like manufacturing capabilities. So we had big boxes of like spare wood, spare metal, random like nuts and bolts. And so it was a lot of like sawing things with one little bandsaw on the corner, using a drill and like putting chains together, stuff like that. And so it was really cool to just kind of learn how to almost DIY make something with just what you have available, which was really useful. And then on the electrical side of things, it was a lot of like learning how to wire the different components of like the power system of the robot, how different things communicate with each other, learning how to like strip a wire, crimp it, stuff like that. But later on, I think I really found my interest in the business sub team. And what was cool is like we didn't really have a business sub team back then. So what I really learned from that was kind of like how to get it started, how to like get every member of the team really involved, because for a lot of these things like outreach, and I'm sure you know it too, Nicole, like you can't really do it on your own. It has to be the entire team participating. So it's like, how do you encourage people to get interested? How do you make events that like people want to go to? And things like raising money, doing bake sales like buttons, and yeah, a lot of like trying to do the best with what you have currently, and also like planning for the future and seeing how you can keep things sustainable.
Yeah, definitely. And just kind of like a follow-up question, did you find that kind of like this element you were talking about earlier of kind of doing a project from start to finish, did you feel that it gave you any kind of skills that you took over to what you're doing now?
Yeah, 100%. I think like there's kind of the obvious part of it where all of these technical skills you learned are things that actually are really useful today. So when I went to school for mechatronics, a lot of the times we were doing projects where we were doing a lot of the things that you do on a robotics team. And a lot of the people around me didn't know how to do things like strip a wire or like saw a piece of metal, things like that. And so it was really nice having that background knowledge beforehand. But I think what was also really useful was kind of being able to like know how to commit to something for a really long time, because you build a robot, you have 6 weeks to build it, but then you also have like the entire year to kind of plan what you want to do next and train people. And then you kind of have like 4 years on the team if you join at the very beginning to like make plans for the future and then try to see those through. So it really taught me how to like be able to like envision something for the future and then actually get it done. And then also that you can never do it alone. So having a team is super important.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Now, Emily, I know that you were mainly on the business team, whereas Shreya was doing kind of like a mix of business and the more technical aspects. So what kind of roles did you take on, and what different things did you learn having had a different experience?
So yeah, like you mentioned, I pretty much predominantly was on the business team. So a lot of my experiences were similar to Shreya in terms of, we did get a lot of experience doing outreach. And I worked with that. And then I also was a chairman's presenter. So that was something that I really enjoyed and I was able to do pretty much throughout my entire time on the team. And that was just like really fun to be able to develop that presentation, to do outreach, and then to be able to present it. In terms of things that I really took and like took on through the rest of my education and hopefully the rest of my careers, I feel like more soft skills. So I've always been relatively outgoing, but I feel like being on the team and meeting a lot of people in first, they just have very different interests than me. Like we're just like a variety of people. So I was able to interact with a lot of people, and that really helped me not only gain my confidence, but just build better relationships. And then even with my presentation skills, being on the chairman's team, we also had to write business plans. So it was a lot of practical skills that I was able to carry forward, even though I didn't go into a engineering field. It was still like a very valuable experience for me.
Yeah, and I think definitely a lot of things, something a lot of people don't realize when you say robotics team is that there is actually that element of business, of sponsors, of presenting and building a lot of skills that you can carry on even if you're not going into a STEM field.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was a little bit daunted when I was first considering it. I was like, robotics, I don't know anything about robotics. But it was really so much more than that. Even though I went my entire 4 years without really touching the robot, I still got to be involved in everything. And I always felt like very a part of the team and able to contribute just based on my own strengths.
Yeah, definitely. Now, finally, we have Liz. So I know that you did have a more tech experience. You mentioned that you were part of the electrical sub-team. So within the electrical sub-team, kind of what did you do and what did you learn?
Yeah, so as opposed to the other Shreya and Emily, who were mainly like business and then branched out, I was the opposite. For the first 3 years, I avoided business like the plague. I did outreach, don't get me wrong, I did my part, but I was never that involved. So yeah, I became electrical lead in grade 10. On that sub-team, I learned how to strip wires. I learned how to solder wires, crimp wires, you name a wire thing, I can probably do it now. And a lot of that stuff. But then as I went through more years, I started branching out a bit more. I think I touched a bit every part of the team. I started doing business my final year. I even poked programming with like a giant stick. So I learned a lot of the stuff like that. I think the most impactful skills I learned, like Emily said, were soft skills. When I came into the team, I was incredibly shy. I would not talk to you. I'd hide in a corner. I'd just watch people work. And by the end, you probably couldn't get me to stop talking. It also helped me branch out to other clubs. There's the former business lead on this team, Kush. He mentioned to me offhand one time that I speak relatively well. I should try DECA. And I ended up doing quite well in DECA, and I enjoyed it. Became president of the club in high school, and did that for 2 years. So I would never have even gotten close to DECA if I'd never been on this team and learned how to interact with people.
Yeah, I think, like, again, it's a really important part, a really important and fundamental part of like a first team is kind of learning how to work with everyone else and kind of really building those skills and applying them in other areas. So now let's move on to life in university. So all of you more or less pursued university majors related to STEM in some way. So Shreya in mechatronics, Hannah in software engineering, Emily in commerce, and Liz in engineering science. So let's start with Emily now. What were your initial impressions of your major? Oh, Emily, I think you're muted.
Yeah, okay, sorry, I couldn't get it. My initial impressions of my major, I found it to be really like enjoyable. I thought that there were a lot of things from specifically my time on the team that helped me prepare. Like I mentioned earlier, we did a lot of like business plans we had to work in groups to do presentations with chairmen, and commerce was very group-based, was very like written and presentation based. So I was able to apply that. And honestly, I really liked it from the beginning. I felt like it was well suited to my interests. So yeah, it was a good choice.
That's really good because I hear about a lot of people who choose a major and then actually end up not liking it. So it's cool that kind of your experiences on the team kind of helped you out there and that you also really enjoyed it, which I think is a huge part of going to university and studying something. Now, Hannah, what about you? What were your initial impressions of your major? I know yours might have been a lot different than Emily's, having been in kind of like a completely different department.
Yeah, for sure. So based off my initial impressions, because I've only done one term in software engineering, I really like it so far. I think that everyone else in software engineering is really cool. And I really like the program structure. I had done a lot of research before I actually like decided software engineering was my first choice. So I looked into like comp sci, a bunch of different universities, engineering, a bunch of different universities, just looking to see what would fit me best. And I think what really helped make the transition easier was that I actually had an upper year female mentor. Her name was Alex. And we basically had monthly calls where we basically go over like life as a software engineering student, life as a woman in software engineering, what it was like to move out of university, live on residence. I was going to live on residence, but then the pandemic happened. So, but it was still really cool getting to hear all about her experiences with that. And I basically I have a document of like all the notes I took during our meetings, even though it was super like laid back and we're friends now. So overall, I'm really enjoying the program. I think first definitely helped me choose the program because I never would have gone to software engineering if I hadn't been a part of the first team. My middle school had like one robotics event one time, and like I went to that, and that's basically how I how I knew that I liked robotics, but they never had anything after, so my interest probably would have died down had I not joined this first robotics team. So I'm really grateful for them, for the team, I guess, for introducing me to that.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that you also mention like your mentorship opportunities. I think that's something that's really important, especially once you get to university, kind of knowing someone at your university, preferably in your program, who can kind of show you the ropes, give you tips, things like that. So moving on, Shreya is our most senior alumni here today besides Hannah. So after graduating, she worked at Uber and now she works at RBC. So Shreya, having this experience, could you tell us about kind of like a particular challenge you faced in your program or your career as a woman in STEM?
Yeah, so I think maybe a challenge I faced specifically as a woman in STEM, it's kind of hard because I guess what's been really nice is I've done a lot of co-ops. I did 6 co-ops at the through like my program at Waterloo. And for the most part, in almost nearly all my co-ops, like I was usually the only like woman in the room, even in terms of like groups with interns, but then also like on my team and stuff like that. And what's really nice about co-ops is, and maybe like I got lucky too, but like it's a professional environment and people there are professional and they're really nice. And I've never had an issue kind of being the only woman in the room working. And like most of the time I don't even notice it maybe until near the end of my internship where I'm like, oh, I'm the only female here. Like that's kind of weird. And it's never really been an issue for me in co-ops. And it's definitely something I'd like to see change though and see more women get involved in these kinds of programs. But for co-op especially, I don't think it's something that held me back. It was definitely a challenge for me in my program because I'm the kind of girl that like really enjoys having other close girl friends around me. And that was a bit hard to find in my program because I think there were like 10 girls and 100 guys. And so you don't really have a lot of people that you can like meet. You're kind of like limited to those, like if you want to find a girlfriend, you're limited to like those 10 people. And so what I found really helpful was also joining clubs to get to meet other people as well. And then also trying to find other aspects of university life where you could meet friends that you can possibly relate to. But for the most part, I think it was still a really welcoming environment in my program as well. And so I'd say like, even though it might feel a little bit awkward at first, try to build up like a good support system and see what you're comfortable with. And like I have a lot of female friends where like it wasn't an issue for them at all, like they're totally fine. So I think it really depends on knowing like what kind of support system that you need. And yeah, I found for the most part it's always been pretty smooth sailing for me. And I think it's like pretty lucky because I've spoken to people in the past who it wasn't as easy for them. And so I think there's been a lot of progress in the space. And definitely like it's really interesting seeing like the lower year classes because you can see big groups of them walking around and you can see that the ratio of like male to female students is definitely changing. And I'm kind of curious to know like for Hannah and Liz what that ratio is like. But yeah, definitely I think I've been seeing it get better and hopefully in the future it just continues to get better.
Yeah, that's really cool that kind of we're progressing. Liz, can you speak to how the ratio is at your school and in your program?
So everything being online, I'm not sure of an accurate like representation of how it is to be a girl because we all message on Discord, so we don't really know each other's genders that much. I know that my program does have around 37% female because U of T has a pretty strong university in terms of getting the gender roles like balanced in terms of the numbers. It's been really fun. I've always been pretty much since I was a kid in groups that were mainly guys and a couple girls. I know on the robotics team when I joined originally, there weren't that many girls. There was a whole bunch that came in a couple of years ago, Nicole, and a bunch of people in your year. I was like, wow. But yeah, in my program, I haven't had any problems. I've met a couple girls. We met up to play card games before the second wave of COVID kind of took off. But yeah, it's been really great. We started a couple myths that girls don't exist. These myths were started by the girls. So overall, yeah, it's a great community. I have not had any problems because of being a female.
I think that's really cool to see that kind of we're improving. And definitely, I know there are a lot of girls on our robotics team now, even though there may not have been in your earlier years. So tying this again all back to your experience on this robotics team. So let's starting with Hannah. Had you not joined first, would you have really seriously considered a career in STEM?
Definitely not. I probably would have. Well, it would have been in STEM because I always had an interest in astronomy as a kid, literally just because stars in space looked cool and they're really pretty and they make really nice backgrounds. So that would have probably been like one of my interests. Also, like becoming an author because I liked reading as a kid, but nothing like what I was super passionate about. It was just kind of like things I sort of like doing and felt like, oh, this is sort of a career. Maybe I could go into this. But really, joining first is what made me really enjoy coding because sometimes it's a bit more difficult to get into programming because everything you code is like static. It's on a website. It's like in a screen, so it's kind of hard to grasp. Like, am I really making something that cool? But especially first, because the code you write goes directly into the robot, and then you basically make the robot go from this like completely stationary machine into like this moving thing where like buttons do things, controllers do things. You can press like and start on autonomous mode, and it runs by itself. really helped me be interested in code and also see the capabilities. I think if I had started off like with just websites, I actually did start off coding websites in grade 7, but I actually got really bored of it because like I added some like JavaScript effects. I made like snowfall. I made like a cursor that like had sparkles around it when you scrolled around, but it was nothing that really like caught my interests until I actually joined the team, and that's when I got to see how cool code can be.
That's really cool. And I also think that a lot of people join the robotics team and then they also get a lot of experience with coding, and that really helps you when you get to university. So next, let's move on to Shreya. So, so you have a career in mechatronics. You study mechatronics. So if you had not joined a first team, do you think you would have considered going into mechatronics?
I'm not too sure. I think kind of like Hannah, like I had a bunch of things I was interested in, but I wasn't really sure what I was passionate about. I liked science, I liked math, and I also did really like reading. So I thought, maybe like an author or something like that. I joined first actually in middle school where I did FLL. So I think I got kind of hooked onto robotics really early on. So it's hard to tell what I would have done otherwise. But I was also really interested in business as well. And so I think like if I hadn't done FRC, I might have gone maybe into like business or math or something like that. So maybe something similar, but definitely probably not mechatronics because first gave me really good exposure to what robotics actually was.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool. So now talking about outside of your career. So starting off with Emily, how do you think for just generally your first experience and having the experience as a woman in STEM impacted your life outside of your studies or outside of your professional life?
Something that I think really affected me about being a woman on the robotics team and in the first sphere was really getting a sense of almost camaraderie and like a desire to support each other. Like on our business team, it was predominantly female, and I felt very supported and like very just a lot of camaraderie with Shreya, with Harpreet, and the other people that were on our team. And it was almost kind of like kinship with girls on other teams. I found it easier to make relationships with girls on different FRC teams. Even when we went to Worlds, there was kind of like a different relationship because we were the minority, and so it was just I found that to be carrying on even in even my personal life. I joined a sorority when I was in university because I sought that same kind of relationship where it was like a sisterhood. We're able to support each other and make those kinds of relationships to empower each other. So that's kind of what I took from being a girl in STEM, and I sought out those same relationships even beyond it.
Yeah, I think it's really cool that being a woman on the robotics team had such a profound impact on your life, even after university or even after being on the team. So Shreya, how about you? How did you find that? Oh, sorry, Hannah, how about you? How did you find that being a woman in STEM has impacted your life outside of your career, outside of your university studies?
Mm-hmm. So like Emily said, I feel like the whole community of girls in first is very, very strong. Like there's so many incredible women, like both inside our team and outside our team. I love seeing all the initiatives that, especially like students that are younger than me, like there's some grade 11s who are like on like 4939 who like started their own conference, and like it's insane what they've been doing, and I wouldn't have like known about them or found or like been friends with them had I not been a woman in STEM and had I not been at first. I actually went to their conference like I think about a year and a half ago to like do my own like conference talk, and that was really cool, and I didn't think I'd ever be doing that. So it's really cool to see like what other people are doing, and also like it's kind of the support system where you get to talk about your experiences in first and you're all bonded over this. And yeah, I think overall just being a woman in STEM has allowed me to be more confident and also be more like comfortable with reaching out to more women because I've done so using my first experience. So that kind of transitions to like other interests like video games or books or stuff like that. So it's kind of cool because it's kind of like a network of growth. Like you start being a woman first, then you're getting all these skills, and then those skills lead to more skills, and it just keeps going on. And it all starts with first. So
That's really cool. So finally, moving on to Liz to kind of tie this all together. So in your professional life, in your personal life, just generally, what does being a woman in STEM mean to you?
Well, I feel like I've mentioned this too much, but when I joined the team, I was a lot quieter. And being one of the few girls on the technical side of the team when I joined, it really taught me how to, I don't know, interact with guys. Like sometimes you gotta get your elbows out. Sometimes you gotta speak up because you're the smallest one in a group, like physically smallest, and you have to say, hey, wait, no, I actually know what's going on here. And it kind of gave me that sense of confidence that, yeah, maybe I'm not the most intimidating looking. Maybe I'm, I don't know, female. I can have valid points. They are good points. And just because I'm a bit quieter doesn't mean I'm not right. So I think that really helped me a lot going forward, just working with groups in high school. I mean, yeah, in high school and in university, having that confidence to say, no, even though I can't be the loudest, I'm still not wrong. And it really gave me that push to say, like, I can do this. Also, yeah, meeting other girls in STEM, seeing like STEM leaders and all these like people get up and talk at conferences and stuff like this, it was really kind of like, okay, I can do this. There are people who have done this. If they can do it, I can probably do it. So there's a lot of confidence seeing that.
Could I add something, Nicole?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, I feel like, you know, at least from my experience, I feel like we were pretty lucky. I think first kind of is conducive to being inclusive like that. Like even when, you know, we always talk about gracious professionalism and stuff, it's like there is a really big expectation for respectfulness. And so I feel like, you know, even though you hear how it is hard for women in STEM careers, I feel like based on what we've been talking about, we had a little bit of a better time. And I think that is just to do with the way that FIRST structures it, is how, you know, there is inclusive, there's been competitions where it's all female drive teams and stuff like that. So I feel like that was such a great part of FIRST, is like it was ingrained to just treat each other equally because that's just the way that it was. So I think we were lucky in that way. And I was just thinking about that when, you know, my other peers were talking. So I want to add that, sorry.
No, it's all good. And I think it's super cool how FIRST they kind of take that initiative to actively include other people who might not have the opportunities that some other people have just naturally. So they really put that push in that's needed to kind of get women on drive teams, to get girls to actually participate in the building of the robot and things like that. So finally, to wrap up, so let's start with Shreya. So to wrap up, is there anything you'd like to say to younger girls who are on this call today to inspire them and motivate them to pursue a career in STEM?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say first off, like follow your passion. Don't feel kind of pressured to do something because you might be like put into a certain box or pigeonhole, or like follow what you're really interested in, and don't be intimidated. I think a lot of the times the stuff that I was intimidated by, like now that I've kind of gotten past that, I look back and I'm like, wow, like that wasn't even a big hurdle. Like I was making such a big deal out of it and it didn't have to be. So definitely have a lot of confidence in yourself. I think one of the things that like being sometimes the only girl in the room taught me was that I kind of felt like I had to prove I was still just as smart as the people around me, but it's also okay to admit that you also are still a normal person. Like you don't have to prove anything. You can still make mistakes. You're also still learning. And I think that it would be unfair for anyone to judge you just because you're a woman in STEM. And maybe sometimes you get something wrong, because everyone gets things wrong all the time. So don't be afraid of like asking questions, even if they might be dumb questions. Don't be afraid of like, that was one thing I was really afraid of, like in class, was like in the university, was like putting my hand up and asking a question. And so yeah, don't be afraid of putting yourself out there and being confident, because I think at the end of the day, like everyone is probably just as nervous as you are, and so they're not really thinking of you, they're just thinking of themselves. So yeah, just be confidence is probably the best advice.
Exactly. And I even heard, I heard a speaker at a conference, they were saying, don't focus so much on your own mistakes. You're probably the only one noticing because everyone's too caught up in theirs. So I guess the moral of the story is, if you need to ask a question, ask it. If you make a mistake, don't be too pressed about it because everyone's making their own mistakes as well. Hannah, do you have anything that you want to add on to what Shreya was saying?
Yeah, so Shreya like covered like I think 90% of the points I was gonna make and like really well. So I won't repeat those, but basically everything Shreya just said. Be confident in yourself. You can do it. There's no reason you can't. Just because you're a girl doesn't mean you're any less than any guy. Like if you're in university or like if you're about to go in university or you got accepted to a program, you guys all made it into the program. So like you're not anything less than them. Like they made it into the program, you made it into the program. Like you're basically on an even playing field in that sense. So don't like, I'm searching for the right expression. Don't think of yourself as less than them. Like, don't put yourself down. I think that's the expression I'm looking for, because you can do it. Even if you can't do it right now, you can put more time into it and you'll get better. And that's the great thing about like practicing because you'll get better over time. You can improve your own skills. And in terms of more advice for being a woman in STEM, I definitely recommend reaching out to upper years. I've talked to like, I think 5 different upper years and about 8 different coffee chats, because Waterloo Software Engineering, the upper year women have organized this organization called Women in Software Engineering. It's a really tight knit, like about 20-ish active female participants. And we basically have like donut coffee chats, game nights. And it's really cool just getting to hear their experiences because every woman in STEM goes through a different experience. Also, I wanted to comment on the ratio of Waterloo software engineering students, just in case anyone's curious. It's 20%. It's actually less than 20%. There's like 26 girls in a program of 146 people, but because everything's online, you barely really notice it. I have heard of experiences, it's really unfortunate, of a girl who was like basically ignored by her group mates that were all 3 of them were guys and basically weren't listening to what she was saying. So I know that it does happen, even though it's never happened to me. And in that case, usually all girls in an engineering program or really any program will kind of like support each other. So as soon as that girl sent in our group chat, like, hey, I don't know what to do, and she was really panicking, everyone, like literally everyone was just like, hey, it's okay. And we all gave it our advice, like, hey, reach out to our software engineering advisor, who's also a woman, and just speak up, tell her about what happened. She has screenshots and she basically like was able to rebound from that. And it was really unfortunate because she was also in 1A. And this happened during her first year, but she was able to rebound off of that. And I think that's really important. Don't let one bad experience like put you down for the rest of university or the rest of high school, the rest of whatever, the rest of your life, because you can always bounce back. And also like, I don't know, I guess she won't be teaming up with them anymore. So she just can like forget that ever happened and move on. And yeah.
Exactly. And I think it's so important not to let a single negative experience kind of deter you from doing anything that you would have done otherwise. I think it's important to kind of build yourself back up after something discouraging happens and not really let your spirits go down. So finally, Liz, is there anything else just to finish off that you'd like to add to what Hannah and Shreya were talking about?
Yeah, they've covered most of my points, but I think there's just a couple things I'd like to say. One of them is some pretty good advice I got from my dad. He's an engineer and he's seen in the industry how there's been slowly more women coming in, how it's been received by people in the industry. And he said, if there's any old fart in the industry who doesn't want you being there because you're a girl, they're just afraid because there's more competent people entering the industry. So like, keep in mind that if anybody's gonna put you down and say you shouldn't be here or you're less worthy of being an engineer because you're a female, just remember they're afraid of you. They're afraid that you're competent. They're afraid that you're coming in and you know what you're doing. And they're afraid because they know that you've faced more challenges than maybe a guy entering STEM because of your gender. And so you've come out a lot stronger. So always remember that if somebody doesn't give you the respect you deserve, just give up on them essentially. Like, why do you want their respect? And just, that's it.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. So moving on to some of our questions. So just a reminder, if you do have any questions that you'd like to ask, there is a link to the Q&A board in the chat. And another note, if you have a specific question for a panelist, please include their name in the question so we know who to direct it to. So going to some of our questions on the board. So someone asked, so this is to Shreya, what was your experience with being on the drive team? Was being a girl driver more pressure and more expectation?
So it was, first off, like an amazing experience. I think it was high pressure in general because you're on the drive team. So I don't think like being a like girl driver had anything to do with that. And also I was really close with my teammates. So I never really felt like disrespected or anything. And then also we had a lot of mentors helping us as well that were kind of watching us and making sure that we were working well as a team. So just like being female didn't really put any negative pressure on me as driver. I will say, like, I remember that year our robot pretty much just kind of drove forwards and backwards. So that also came with a set of like different challenges on its own. But overall, it was like an amazing experience. And even though it was like high pressure, I'm really glad I got to do it. It was a pretty unique experience.
Yeah, and I think everyone who's had an experience on the drive team can attest to the fact that it is an amazing experience. I personally haven't been a driver, but I've heard from a lot of people who have that it's a really good experience and you come out with a lot that you've learned.
If I could just
going
in there.
Oh, yeah.
I know it was mentioned earlier with the all-girls drive team. I was on that for 3 years. And I can't remember how many times I was the primary driver, but quite a few of those times I at least tried being primary driver. And let me tell you, it feels so good when you beat someone and you know that's their main drive team and you're just like this, I showed up to one event, I've got no practice. What are the controls, drive team? Like, man, drive team is fun. I've never been put down because of my gender. Yeah, it was just really, really fun.
If I can also add on the point, during my grade 12, either grade 11 or grade 12, my mind covered which event it was, I was doing strategy for the team. And I remember we had a drive coach and I was like the student strategy lead. And this other drive coach came up to our pit and was like, hey, who's doing your strategy? And like the other drive coach, his name is Bilal. He was like a head taller than me or something like that. And so he was talking to this guy. And then Bilal just like points to me and I'm just like there with my clipboard as like this like small girl, just like, because I feel like drive coaches are usually mentors, so they usually expect to be doing strat with someone else who's a mentor. So he just looks at me and he just looks at me, he nods and he's like, okay, let's go. And like I remember that because I remember thinking like, oh, what if he says something like, oh, I don't want to do strategy with, I don't think he would, I've never heard that happen, but I was just like, that was a fear in my mind. What if he said like, I don't want to do strategy with this like little student or something like that? But he just like nodded to me, was like, okay, yep, this is who 1325 chose to do their strategy, we'll go with it. And I don't think me being a girl had anything to do with it, although I don't know, maybe it was running through his mind, but I felt like people don't like discriminate, I think is the right word, against like if you're a woman and if you're like in a leadership position and maybe you don't look the part, but you are the part because your team gave you the part. So, you know, take ownership of that. And I think we ended up winning that match. So yeah, it worked.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good takeaway. Like if you're in a position, you did earn that position. So don't let anyone make you feel like you didn't deserve it. Just one final question before we finish. So Emily, what was the moment when you won the first Chairman's Award for the team?
Oh my gosh, it was so amazing. It was like, I'll always remember it. It was so out of like the scope of our even dreams. Like we tried really hard to do it and we really like, you know, gave it our all, but it was just, Chairman's was just such an elusive, like amazing thing to achieve. So when we got it, it was like so great. And I felt so proud that, you know, we were just, at the time, we were still very small. We didn't really have like a huge name for ourselves yet, not like, you know, we do now where we're more prominent. So it was just like amazing. And I'm so grateful that we did get that chance, that they did pick, you know, a smaller team and they did, you know, like recognize all of our contributions and the potential that we had, because I do feel like in some ways it was like a kickstart to some of the rest of the successes that we had, at least definitely on the business team. It gave us, you know, such a boost in confidence and it helped us, you know, continue to replicate that success. So it was amazing. It was really fun. It was like surreal. And so, yeah, it was great.
Yeah, and I think definitely what that first chairman win did is, and we hear about it all the time, it never stops. We hear about that first win all the time. But I think what it did is it kind of set the groundwork for kind of like a model for all of our other outreach initiatives. And it kind of just, like you said, gave the team that kickstart that we really needed at the time. So we are going to start closing up the panel now. So just a couple final notes before we go. So let me just share back the presentation. So if you have any other questions, feel free to shoot us a message on any of our social media and we'll forward it to our panelists and they can definitely get an answer back to you. But so on that note, you can find us on any of our social medias, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at FRC1325. If you want to check out our website, and that does have a more detailed look at some of our other initiatives, some resources, that is at team1325.com. And one final note, I did say we would get to this earlier in the session, but our registration is now open for the 2020-2021 season. So if you head over to team1325.com, you can register if you are aged from 13 to 18. I think everyone on this call can attest to the fact that being on a first team, especially this one, is such a life-changing experience. It's such a positive experience. You meet so many people and you learn so many things that you take over to everything you do after that. Now, one final note, we do have a panel that is running tomorrow on the student experience in university. So if you want to learn about what to expect when you get to university with regards to dorms, housing, books, things like that, and what to expect from your teachers, this is definitely a panel you should join. So it is tomorrow from 7 to 8, and you can find the link to the call the same way that you joined this call through our website. So one final thank you and a huge one to our panelists for coming out today and sharing all of these wonderful experiences and takeaways that they've had. And thank you once again to all of you for joining today. Bye, everyone.